All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So like I said in the last video, I do apologize for the tardiness of this video. Um, if you watched the other video, you've already heard this, but for those of you guys who didn't, I did have COVID. I tested negative for it, came back, and I had like a stack of work that a lot of students did during the time I was out. So I was wrestling with that. Other stuff I had to do for this past week, and I know a lot of you guys tend to know that on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when I make these videos and upload them. But because of everything with the work and meetings and getting all kinds of stuff ready for you guys, and yeah, it was impossible to do. So I do apologize. So here it is now, though, so you guys can listen and learn on this lesson. So today we are ending the reconstruction. This is the end. You're going to see how this great idea, um, this plan to bring our country from the war to rebuild and help African Americans who were slaves. Now they're free to try to bring them in to help them out to catch up with the rest of the country. Um, you're gonna see what happens. Okay, I don't want to spoil it, but here it is. We're going to analyze the Grant administration. General Grant, yes, if you remember him from the Civil War lessons, yeah, he comes in. We're going to examine the turn in trust that people had in the government. Yeah, we're going to look at that, how the faith in the government changed. Then we're going to create an argument on whether a deal slash compromise was made for Hayes. Now, that's an interesting topic, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, your warm up. So the first question asks you, what's the difference between Grant, which is the tall one, his peace, because if you can read it, he says, let us have peace. Peace, he's saying, is Peace. All the other little guys are saying, let us have a peace. And they're talking Piece. So the first question is asking you, what's the difference between Grant's peace and those other guys' peace? So Grant's Peace, that's his piece, and the little guy's is Piece. What's the difference between the two pieces? Okay. The second question asks you, what do you think the government cake represents? Because obviously we all know there is no such thing as a government cake, but obviously it represents something. So as you can see, it's something these guys want. I mean, they're fighting each other, tugging on him. I mean, they're on his legs for crying out loud. So, what do you think the government cake represents? What is something these guys could possibly want from the government so badly that they're ready to just basically tear them apart and trample them for it? Okay, so think about it, write your response, okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so here we go. General Grant, the second most famous man in our country at that time. Number one was, of course, Abraham Lincoln, but Grant was number two. Grant was seen as a savior as well, not just the man who defeated and won uh, the Battle of Gettysburg, and Vicksburg and all that stuff, but also the man who accepted the surrender of Robert E. Lee and things like that. He was the top general for the Civil War. So he was seen just as high as Lincoln, but Lincoln was, of course, higher, especially after his death. It was like Lincoln number one solidified him. But Grant was like, you know what, um, number two in the country when it came to most loved person. Problem was this: we needed a president. Grant, little fun fact, had no political experience. He was never a governor, a mayor, an alderman, a senator, House of Representative member, nothing, nothing, But he ran mainly because he knew this government needed leadership. He had leadership capabilities. So he's like, well, then, yeah, I'll run, for president. So he did. He won. Again, second most famous person in our country. So, of course, he won. Another popular little fun fact about him. He was very popular. Again, being number two most loved person. Very popular. But he was extremely shy. So if you ever been in a party or an event where people are like, shake, hey, how you doing, this and that, and you're just like, hey, oh, hey, and you just like want to back away from everyone, go to the wall, kind of be, like a wallflower and not be seen. That was Grant. He didn't like all that attention. He didn't like all that, kind of stuff. He was very shy to meet new people and just talk about whatever. He didn't like that. Okay. Another thing about Grant is this guy smoked like 20 cigars a day on average. Okay. 20 cigars. That's, almost one an hour. So you can imagine the guy sleeps for, let's say, 8 hours. In 16 hours, he smoked 20 cigars. The guy, and these are cigars, not cigarettes. Cigarettes are tiny. Cigars are big. And this guy's like smoking these cigars left and right. And he's a freight train. And he was known to be with a little glass of whiskey and things like that. So yeah, he was a drinker and he smoked cigars like crazy. Um, Another thing about Grant was he wasn't a very good person at picking out this is a good person. You know, he didn't have that sense to realize like this person is shady. There's something about this person. He didn't have that feeling. So if someone basically showed him that, hey, I'm a good person, I care, and things like that, he would trust them. And this was basically his downfall. Okay, because the people he picked for his administration, the people to help him run the country, were some of the worst people you could ever pick. These guys got into government and were placed into positions. And instead of being like, wow, how can I help the American people? What could I do to make my job, to make the jobs of and the lives of everyone better? No, they were looking at more like, how can I make money out of this? So let's say the Secretary of War, right? Let's say they were basically going like, okay, we need guns. We need more guns. So they might look at other gun manufacturers, people making guns, and he might be like, well, okay, I have a government contract. You wanted to sell your guns for 100,000, you're 200,000, you're 300,000. Okay, how much are you going to give me? How much money are you going to give me? I don't care how much they cost. How much money are you going to give me? And they would pay him, 10,000, 100,000, whatever amount of money. And whoever gave him the most money, they got the contract. They basically just looked after themselves. And some Republicans felt that their party was selling their influence to, again, make money. And that was not what they were about. At this time, too, a lot of Republicans trusted the government. When people like Lincoln said, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, this is going to work, trust me, believe me, he followed through because, again, he was honest Abe. He installed that faith in our government. And when they said they're going to do something, they did it. When he said, trust me on this, that they could trust him. So a lot of people felt when after he died, hey, the government is caring. The government is looking out for the people. And now it's shown its ugly face and misusing that trust so that these guys can line up their pockets. And yeah, it got bad. Also, Grant's economic policy seemed to favor the rich, not really helping the middle class and definitely not helping out the poor, but rather, did you have money? How can we help you? So some Republicans left the Republican Party. They broke off into another group called the Liberal Republicans. And anytime a splinter group breaks off from a major group, like the Republicans or Democrats, this is where the other side, the other power, has a chance to take over. Okay, it's happened time and time again in the in the future in the elections after this thing. A lot of times Republicans or Democrats would break off. They would be united, and so the other side would win. Little foreshadowing there, but okay. So here's my next question to you. Should the president be responsible for the action of the people in his administration? Some people say, hey, the president picked this one guy to do this job, Secretary of State, Secretary of Interior, Secretary of Energy. And if they mess up, some people feel the president um, should be responsible for it because they're the ones who picked that person. They're the ones who should know, hey, this guy knows what they're doing. They have experience in that field, as opposed to, hey, this guy was my friend. He needs a job, so I'm gonna give him a job. And that fool has no idea what's going on about that job. They have no idea, but they just took it because, hey, it's an easy job, and they mess things up. So should the president be at fault, or should that person be at fault? They're the ones who did the wrong thing. They're the ones who messed up, not the president. His hand wasn't the one who pressed the button, you know, rather it was that person. So what do you think? Should the president be responsible for the actions of the people he put in charge of certain things, or do we put the responsibility on the people who actually messed up? And why do you feel that way? Okay, so justify your reasoning. Put that down. Don't forget the whys. Why you believe this. Okay, so go ahead, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, Grant runs again and again because of his popularity and because people do love him. He wins again. Now, you would think the second time around he'd be like, well, I'm going to do better. I'm not going to let that same mistake that happened those 4 years happen again these next 4 years. That's somebody with rationale and realizing that the faults they made, they would try to fix it. Grant didn't. He basically kept the same people. Those who did, he did replace. He put even worse people inside. It got so bad, our economy was really hit hard. I mean, really hit hard. So, a very popular and powerful bank back then. So think of like a Wells Fargo and Bank of America, or like a Chase and Citibank. That they merged together to make one huge bank. That's how big this bank was, and they went bankrupt. It was caused the Panic of 1873. Now here's the difference, like I told in class. Um, Nowadays it's different from the banking back then. Back then, once you put your money in the bank, that physical dollar was in the bank until the bank lent it out, you know, and the banks make money from interest, so they lend out $1,000 to somebody, some business, they may expect $1,500 back, you know, so that's the thing. That's how the bank makes their money. Um, but the thing is, uh, during this time, like if somebody robbed the bank, they physically took your money. And that was it. You could not get your money back. Nowadays, if you put your money in a bank, be sure you see somewhere, either near the teller or somewhere on the wall, somewhere that says FDIC. That means your money is federally insured. So if a bank gets robbed and you're like, oh, I just deposited my money in there, your money is federally insured. Okay. If it does not have that, that basically means if we get robbed, your money's gone and we can't get you your money back. Sorry, type of thing. Um, but that's the difference between banks now and then. And so what happened when this panic happened, it rattled people to the bone because they're like, well, my life savings, my money is in the bank and now it's gone. What the heck? Why is this happening? And so it created a depression that lasted for basically 10 years. Now, Grant's popularity really now started to, I mean, it was almost dead. This is when the Democrats, the other side, were like, this is our chance. This is our chance. We don't have to say or do anything to make the other side look bad. They're doing that themselves. So they, during the midterms, they ran in large numbers and they won. They took over the House of Representatives, and in the Senate, they basically almost took over. Now, with the power being shifted from Lincoln's Republicans to the Democrats now, some people are beginning to see like this. I think this is the end of the Reconstruction because all those laws that were passed to help out African Americans, it's going to change now. It's going to stop. People who were paying real close attention could see that this this era is changing. So here's my question to you. Do you think that the Reconstruction was a good idea? Yes or no? To spend that, I mean, millions of dollars, millions of man hours, because again, you have to remember all these soldiers, generals, and things like that are spread along all across the South. The government has to pay these people. They had to feed them. They had to provide some type of shelter. Uh, Not only that, the programs that they created were feeding, clothing, helping African Americans, um, things like that. So all that time, all that man hours, and it's now coming to an end. Do you think it was a good idea? Tell me yes or no and why. All right. Now, as one student told me, well, yeah, that's kind of a stupid question. Of course, it was a good idea. It's like, well, you have to remember this. There's a lot of good ideas that happen. A lot of people in our government, a lot of people in general, think that food for children should be free. That every kid should not go to school or leave school hungry. That they should all be fed in school. No one's gonna say no to that. But there's people who say, well, look at the cost. Look at the cost. Look how much it's gonna cost us, and how many people we're going to hire to feed all these kids and all this food and things like that. What if the kids don't want it? That's money lost and things like that. So all this stuff, even though it's a great idea, some people don't agree with it. So just because something is a good idea, we know it for a fact doesn't mean that it comes true. So again, that's why I ask these type of questions. Okay. So write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So Democrats really started to gain power in the South. Sometimes they won elections where they didn't have to cheat, but sometimes they cheated through fraud and intimidation. Um, Basically, a lot of times, all they had to do was basically say, "Hey, I promise to cut the taxes," and that was it. These taxes to pay for programs to help African Americans and to build this, rebuild that. They're like, we're gonna cut those taxes. And do you really want to reelect these guys? Look at they all they care about is themselves. They're selling to the highest bidder. You know, Grant's administration is corrupt. Do you really want them? So that type of stuff really helped the Democrats win the election and the midterm elections. And in 1876, here comes the presidential election. And a lot of Democrats saw this election as a wave to save the South. It's a crusade we're on. We have to save the South. They're being overly dramatic, but they they made it sound like if it's not now, we'll never win. Because again, they want the power now. They don't want to wait for another 4 years. They want it now. So they're making it so dramatic, so much more intense than it really is. So this election, 1876, was between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden. Okay, here's the problem: the race in like 5 states was too close to call. So there were 20 electoral college votes that were up for grabs, basically. So during a little recount, 19 of those states came from southern Republican rule. Okay. Thing is, a lot of people who were Democrat in the South, a lot of people are Democrat. They did not like the Republicans. They didn't like how things were. So Tilden only needed 3 electoral college votes. So basically, he either needed 2 small states or just 1 big state, and he would win. Okay. All of these, again, of like the 5, like 4 of them are in the South. So only needs to win 1 big state or 2 small states. He doesn't win. Somehow, some way, he does not win. Hayes wins. I mean, out of the blue, this shocked so many people, so many people, and it's angered some people. Whereas some other people who kind of knew what was going on, they're like, "No need to get angry. No need to get angry. Don't worry, things will turn out just fine." So here's my question to you: Tilden needed to win just 1 state, but somehow lost all 5. How do you think Hayes won the 5? Do you think it was legit? Like, hey, it was totally fair. Some votes weren't counted yet. Some were miscounted or thought it looked like they were voting one way or the other. Couldn't, see the difference. Um, or do you think something happened? Voter fraud. Stuffing the ballots. Um, what do you think? Intimidation. Some type of thing happened. Negative thing happened. What do you think? What do you think? Okay. So write your response. Okay. Because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So, to a lot of historians, the Compromise of 1877 is hard to dissect because the thing is, there in history, historians need concrete evidence, documentation, something to help out. Even like a rumor could really kind of change things a little bit. Even that could start something. But there is nothing. There is no concrete evidence. And but the thing is, historians believe a deal was made for Hayes to win. Because what Hayes does once he takes over and once he becomes president, just is like that's not what a Republican president would do. That's kind of shady. So right away, he's elected. The very next month in 1877, the federal troops that were stationed in the South are recalled. So all those soldiers in the South, they leave. Okay, they leave. They're taken out. Um, Without those federal troops in the South, Republicans lost control. Those little areas where Republicans, did win for like their mayor or sheriff or things like that, things turned badly and very quickly for those guys. Policies and protection was now gone. So the laws that were made to help out African Americans and protect them were now all of a sudden being overturned. This is seen as a true end of the Reconstruction. So, um, thing is, the Democrats played this smart. So instead of hey, they won the election, a lot of them wanted to be like, hey, we won, you lost, we're gonna change back all the stuff. They knew if they did that stuff, the Republicans would then uh, turn on them, and the next election they might vote Republican, and that would take away the Democratic power. So they're like, no, 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 we're not gonna get in their face. We're not gonna talk crap. We're not gonna do any of that stuff. In fact, we're gonna smile and be nice to them and things like that. So that's what they did, and a lot of Southern leaders, unlike some of their people, they knew they couldn't go back. Because some of their people in the South were like, yes, let's turn back the 15th Amendment. Let's turn back the 14th and the 13th. Let's bring back slavery. Let's do it. And they're like, we can't. Okay, do you guys not understand? We cannot overturn those amendments, you know, because to overturn the amendment, you need 2/3 of the state of our country. We don't have 2/3 of the state. We'll never have 2/3 of the states. They'll never overturn slavery or to say that African Americans aren't citizens or that they shouldn't have the right to vote. They won't overturn those. So get that out of your head. But what we can do is give them the illusion that we're going to change. That's what the South does. They basically tell the North, we're going to focus on a new South. So that old way of thinking, that slavery and stuff like that, the plantations, the big old farm fields, all that type of thinking is going to go away. We're going to focus on a new South. And this made a lot of Republicans, the northern people, very happy. They're like, hey, good. You guys realize what you guys are doing wrong. This will help you out. Trust me. This will work out for the best. So, with that being said, the North started to create more railroads and so many more factories, industries, things like that in the North. So, jobs were popping off everywhere. Railroads were connecting, big cities to small towns and things like that. So things were looking good and prosperous in the North. In the South, however, even though they said we're going to change, they really didn't change. Okay, yes, they did add in some more railroads. Okay, they did have some factories, but a lot of people cringe because this big factory is taking up a lot of land, and that land could be used to grow cotton and tobacco and things like that. You can't just pick up a factory from the ground and then move it somewhere else. No, you can't. So all that land that factory is on, that's wasted land forever until that factory comes down. So they saw that as losing money, and they're like, oh, I could have used that land to build or plant this or that. Thing is, a lot of African Americans in the South who lived through slavery, experienced it, saw now we're going backwards. We're going back to the way it was. Yes, granted, we are not slaves. We are free, but we're not being treated as free people. We're not being treated as equals. We're treated as second class citizens. So not just them, but also poor white farmers. They felt the pressure too. And basically, they had, at one point they were paying rent to work on land. Yeah, I know that kind of sounds stupid. Like you go to work and you're paying to go to work. It's like, why would they do that? It's the way it was. Okay, so yeah, they worked on the land and they picked the stuff. Okay, but at the end, they ended up being sharecroppers. Sharecroppers, this is how it works. You work on a piece of land. Okay, whether it's cotton, tobacco, whatever they're growing. For every 3 pounds, you keep 1 pound. You give the person who owned the land, you give them 2 pounds. Okay. From that pound, you can make your own clothes, you can sell it or whatever. Okay. You also had to pay rent for the tools and animals used to plow the ground, to get out the weeds and things like that. Also, they had to buy the seeds and fertilizer, all that stuff from the owner of that land. Okay, now here's the thing, guys. Hopefully you're thinking, well, how did they ever make money? That's the thing. That's the thing. That is how they kept them, not as like slaves in chains and stuff like that, but as slaves in that you owe me money. You owe a debt. And how do you pay off this debt? By working. That, guys, that's how they made African Americans basically slaves all over again, but still with them being free. And this continued, I mean, all the way in some places in the South, all the way to the 1960s. Basically, like 60 years, 80 years. You know, it was really, really bad. Okay. And like I said, a large majority of African Americans would remain poor and nothing would change for basically almost 100 years. There's even a thing where some African Americans during the 1960s, when Martin Luther King and the Freedom Riders, all of them were trying to get them to register to vote, some African Americans who were like 60, 70 years old had no idea they had the right to register to vote because they were kept down. They were told you need to go to work instead of go to school. You know, they weren't taught um, that same way as white children in the South. And we're going to get to that in the next lesson. Okay. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Oh, my bad. Forgot the question. Oops. My bad. So here's your next question. What do you think is going to happen to African Americans in the South now that Democrats have lost, the Democrats have a lot of political power and the Reconstruction's over? So again, from the days of Martin Luther King all the way backwards to this point, which we're talking about, you know, use your prior knowledge. If you watch movies, documentaries, this should really help you out. How are their lives going to be? It can be hunky dory, chipper, or things will be bad, you know, horrible, and explain in ways. You know, if you can find a way or two, find the thing that happened during that time to them. Okay, so I think that's it. Let me double check. Nope, we have the exit ticket. My bad. So here's your exit ticket. Remember, pick one of these questions. Should Grant be considered a bad president because of his administration? Yes, no, why or why not? What do you think? The next question to that says, the American people once had trust in their government. Do you think that will ever come back? Tell me yes, no, and why. Explain why you believe that it will or it'll never come back. Explain why. The last one says, do you think a deal was made for Hayes, or do you think that he was going to end Reconstruction anyway? Like I said, good ideas always come up, but when it comes to people, you know, some people are going to always say, look how much it's costing us. This is what it's doing to us. You know, we can't pay for this. You know, some people always look at the money figure of it, even though it's something people want and people agree we should have. Still, some people bring up the how much money it costs, and we don't get it. So again, do you think there was a deal made, or do you think he was going to end it anyway? And why do you believe this? Okay. So once you are finished, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Hopefully you learned something new. You guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?